namely that antidepressants often do not do what they promise and are in fact causing harm to many.
Dr. Steve Hotze is suing over Obamacare's employer mandate.
It's time for a wellness revolution. Brought to you by Hotze Health and Wellness Center. Honest discussion on maintaining health and wellness naturally to enjoy a better quality of life.
He's the doctor fighting to let you keep your doctor.
Now, Dr. Stephen Hotze.
Welcome to Dr. Hotze's Wellness Revolution. This is Stacey Banfield here with Dr. Stephen Hotze, founder of the Hotze Health and Wellness Center. And just a quick reminder that it is so easy to be a subscriber to our podcasts. All you have to do, if you're a YouTube viewer, there's a place where you can subscribe. You can also go to hotzepodcast.com. That's HOTZE podcast.com. I am so excited about the program today. Dr. Patrick Porter, is on the line with us, and he is the founder of BrainTap, which is an amazing system, and I'm so thrilled that he's on the program today with us, Dr. Hotze, so take it away.
Thank you so much, Stacey, and remember what I believe. I believe that you need a health coach. You need a doctor and a staff of professionals who can coach you on a path of health and wellness naturally so you enjoy a better quality of life as you age without using pharmaceutical drugs.
Absolutely.
And there are many avenues to help you obtain good health, particularly brain health. So brain health, it's important to have good nutrition, so a good healthy eating program. We recommend the paleo eating program, replenishment of your hormones with bioidentical hormones, particularly thyroid and your sex hormones, vitamin and mineral supplementation, and a good exercise program. Doesn't mean you have to run the marathon, but if you get up and walk a mile or two every day, you're going to go a long way. But there's something else that's very important that we use here at the Hotze Health and Wellness Center and recommend. It's a system that we learned about a year ago when we were in
Jacksonville, I believe.
Jacksonville, Florida. We sure were.
Yes, sir.
You were there, and so
that's right.
We see up on the wall there's this big sign that says BrainTap, and people are sitting around in chairs and they have headgears on, and as a matter of fact, they have, if you're looking on YouTube now, you can see they have covering over their eyes, and they were sitting there so calm, and the individuals there measured brain waves before and after you did this BrainTap, which is brain entrainment, and so we found out, and we started asking questions about it. I was kind of skeptical at first, and I went in and did one, and I went, man, that's remarkable. We've got to adopt this at our practice. So we did, and have begun to use it in helping people entrain their brain. And the specialist, the founder of this whole system of technology, which is really brain entrainment, where you train your brain to think correctly and to go to different levels in your brain, different brain waves, is Dr. Patrick Porter, who is out of North Carolina. And he has BrainTap franchises all over the country where he's helped medical doctors, chiropractors, naturopathic doctors, and others all over the country adopt this system to help their people think clearly. And Dr. Porter, why don't you just tell us about your background? I thought it was interesting. You had gone to Louisiana Baptist College and you did counseling. And how did you get interested in this whole concept of brain technology and neurolinguistic programming and how it could affect people in a positive manner?
Well, it started for me really as a young child. I was 12 years old, and my dad was excelling at being a really good alcoholic. And from our church, the sister Teresa Mary and our father Fitzpatrick, he taught a program about how to relax. And my dad finally learned how to relax without alcohol, and that started his journey. He was also a counselor, so that started his journey into figuring out how to use biofeedback machines like galvanic skin response systems, which allow you to train your brain to get out of this high stress we're in. And for me, I used it, or my dad actually kind of tricked me to use it with sports. So I excelled in sports by using my brain, and then visualization and relaxation techniques. And then when I got to college and I was doing counseling, and just as my background, doing a lot of Christian counseling and helping people in their devotion and things of that nature, my love was always about sports. So I got into doing some sports psychology, and then that led me to Phoenix, Arizona, where I started to work with addiction therapy. And then I realized that my real passion was helping people with technology, because I went to school first before going to Louisiana Baptist Christian. I went to school at a place called Ferris State for electrical engineering. So when somebody asks, how does a psychologist get involved with electronics? Well, that's kind of how the two marry together. And I've always been kind of geeky myself before the word was actually so out there in the public. But in 1986, my brother and I, Michael, who you met there in Jacksonville, we were part of a team at Light and Sound Research, and we developed the very first portable light and sound machine. And it was really designed for our clinics that were doing biofeedback. There was no such thing back then as neurofeedback. So we were helping people out of pain with this device. And then we find now that it does all of these other incredible things, because the brain is the central, controller of the rest of the body. So if you get your thoughts right, you can help get your body right.
Well, that's right. Now, tell us how you developed the concept of BrainTap. Now, BrainTap, folks, it's a fairly simple concept. You put on headgear, and you put on there's a little flap that goes over your eyes, and there's light that flickers both in your ears and in your eyes, and then there's music, and then Dr. Porter comes on, and he has over 700, maybe up to 1,000 by now, of different, I guess you would say, training sessions where he can train your brain to get in different wavelengths. So, Doctor, talk to us about the brain and wavelengths. Most people have probably heard of the electroencephalogram, where if somebody has a brain problem, they go in and they do an EEG, not an EKG, that's for the heart, an EEG, an electroencephalogram, and they'll measure the brain waves, and they can tell a lot about the functioning of the brain by the brain waves. Tell me how you came to understand the different levels of the thought process, how they were related to the various wave patterns in the brain, and what you do in your BrainTap system to help people get into the right brain waves so they can function well.
Okay. Well, part of it is that our bodies are naturally designed to mimic their environment. In fact, the reason people get jet lag is they're moving across our light spectrum too quickly. And our body is tuned, for instance, if we're not in bed before 12 o'clock, it's kind of hard for our body to produce melatonin. So we don't get the deep sleep that we need. That's why people who work third shift sometimes can develop more diseases than others, because their body's not in tune with their environment. So we're using light and sound and vibration to do that. And researchers before me actually started to do work in light, because back before the 30s, it was even more popular than it was at the time I started it up. But because you could put somebody into an anesthetic state with chemicals to do surgery, it kind of put that science behind. But before that, they were always looking for ways on the battlefield. How can we get somebody into an altered state? And what we know about the brain is if there's 4 primary brainwave patterns we're going to talk about today. Now, we could break that up into more. So if there's a neuroscientist out there, yes, there's more brainwaves in the 4 I'm going to talk about. But beta is the state that you're in when you're in that high stress, that fight or flight. And if you're in that for a prolonged period of time, which most of your listeners are under, just like the rest of America here, low-level chronic stress. So when we're under low-level chronic stress, the body and the brain, literally as the control mechanism, keeps us in ready alert. Now, what happens when we do that is our body doesn't digest food properly. It doesn't process information properly, because really it is basically in a fight or flight scenario.
So you would call that the reactionary mind.
Yes. So that's
you're reacting to your environment and all the stimuli, and you're under chronic stress. And most people live their life in that brainwave when they're awake.
Yes, and then when they try to go to sleep, the problem is, and that's why 1 in 3 Americans out there aren't sleeping well, is because once you habituate to this high state of stress, your body starts to believe that's normal for you. It's not normal, but it's normal for the person who's experiencing it. So what we have to do with the BrainTap is the first step is to get them out of for those doctors that might be tuning into your podcast, we're going to get them out of high sympathetics, and we're going to turn on their parasympathetic system. That's the rest, relax, and heal mode that people get into, like when they're in prayer, relaxation, they go to the beach, or they go to a mountaintop. When they get out of their everyday stress, their body will naturally, and these brainwave states are called alpha and theta. And we call these the intuitive and the inventive mind. So when you think about intuition, most of us I like to quote Job. He said in the Bible, he says that what I have feared greatly has come upon me. And most people don't understand that their thinking brings things about. As you think in your heart, you'll become. So what we're going to do is we're going to start to change the way people think. And now with science has proven that we can change up to 2,300 gene expressions by relaxing the body and visualizing positive information. Now, unfortunately, the same thing can happen with negative if somebody's being conditioned negatively. So we need to, focus on the positive, in other words, and eliminate the negative. We don't use any negative conditioning. We're using positive. In fact, we like to tell people with the BrainTap, we're teaching people how to think, not what to think. There's so many people out there telling us what to think that we want to focus on how you think. So how do you process, for instance, we're doing a study right now with Kansas State Medical Center at the University of Kansas, and it's all about PTSD because they don't know how to think anymore because they're subject to this wartime experience, and they come home and they're not at war anymore, but their brain stays in that ready alert. Now, that's an extreme expression of this reactionary mind we're talking about, but they're locked into that and they can't get out of it, and it causes all sorts of problems in their home life, their business, their personal life, their health, of their body. So the BrainTap works right at the core to get them thinking and get their body back in balance. Everyone knows that there's an innate intelligence in the body, and depending upon your religious preference, everything that happens to us happens through us. And if we keep the innate intelligence, in other words, this intelligence of our body in harmony, then it can take care of itself, like taking care of a scab we might get on our knee or elbow when we were a kid. We don't fret about it. Maybe mom or dad kissed it, put a Band-Aid on it, and it healed. But as we get older, we stress about stressing, and that causes even more problems to the body than the stress that was in the first place. And then there's one more brainwave pattern, and then we can kind of continue. The delta brainwave pattern, which is deep sleep. The problem people have that sleep is most of the time, that test that you took in Jacksonville, we can actually show, and we've done thousands of these tests, and we find that probably 90% of the people out there are actually in over 50% delta while they're awake. What this means is they have such inflammation in their body, and this is where a lot of your products come in, because we need to get the inflammation down from the body. Now we can work on that with the brain and get them out of delta, but they still have to do something about put out the fire that's going on inside their body because of all the things that are happening.
That's right. So take us through. During the day, most individuals, if they're working and out making something happen, they're operating in a beta state, which means that they're in a reactionary fight or flight state. It's a lot of stress. When they lay down to go to sleep, what happens then? If they don't have the BrainTap, let's talk about that. What is the normal progression?
For 1 out of every third person, they lay in bed and they're not able to flip the switch. There's actually, every one of us should be in all those brainwaves all the time. It's just a percentage of brainwave activity. So they should be 40% in beta when they're awake, 35% or 30% in theta, and then 10% in alpha, and then 10% in theta, and only 5% delta. When you go to sleep, those numbers should switch. We should be in like 90% delta and very little beta, because if you go through these sleep cycles at night and you hear a loud noise and you're in one of these cycles of sleep and you're in a light beta state, you'll wake up and you'll feel like you slept through the whole night, because it's like taking a balloon underwater, and then when it hits the surface of the water, it pops out. Our consciousness pops us awake because we're now in beta. During sleep, we should move almost like a dance through these different brain waves, leaving beta out of the equation. But when you're in high stress all the time, or your body's healing because it's high inflammation, the body says, hey, it's counterintuitive because we need to really relax to heal. But a lot of people think they need to be doing something. So especially those high left brain people that actually think that they can think their way into being well without actually being creative about it. There's part of it is just imagining and being in harmony and just relaxing and letting go. And so many people have a hard time doing that. Now, on the other hand, we have people that are so, like the image of a surfer or an artist who doesn't know how to pay their bills. So you've got to have that balance there. And at night, what should happen for the 2/3 of the people, they lay down at night and their brainwaves, their beta brainwaves kind of slow down. They get into more of an alpha rhythm. That's when the dreams happen. And then in theta, you might even have rapid eye movement. And then when you get to delta, you have deep sleep. And what's really neat in our day and age, you can buy a watch you wear on your wrist, or you can get all these sorts of devices that you can put on your bed and measure your sleep cycles. But we should get anywhere between 1 hour to 2 hours of deep delta sleep every night. If you get that, our government has actually shown our military that you can survive on as little as 4 hours sleep. But you have to get that 2 hours, 1 to 2 hours of deep delta sleep. If you only get, some people sleep all night long, but they get very little, less than 10 minutes of delta sleep. If they could sleep for 11 hours, they're never going to wake up recharged because it's in that state of delta that it's almost like the body gets connected to an infinite resource for energy, and it replenishes our body.
Okay, so tell me, how did you come up with the concept of BrainTap? How did you come up with the concept of music, of light, of neuro-linguistic programming, of your talks to cover, the number of topics that Dr. Porter covers on BrainTap? And by the way, if you're interested in learning about BrainTap, just type in BrainTap, BrainTap, and you can go to the website and you can learn about BrainTap. And I don't know if you can buy it online. Can you buy it online, the equipment?
Well, yeah. Usually we refer them out to one of our local doctors,
right?
So they can try it. But they can obviously call your office, or you can provide them a link, and they can do it on their own phone or app anywhere in the world. That's pretty easy to do. And how we created it really was that my dad was a counselor. I went to school for that, so we know counseling. But unfortunately, for counseling, only about 12% of the time do we have a success. I've never seen a study that actually shows better than that. And the reason is that when we talk about problems, we make them worse. They call it we revivify the memory, so the brain starts to run that program again. So what we started to do, the reason we got into positive psychology really, which includes neurolinguistic programming, is we need to start to instruct the brain like a computer. We don't load in programs into our computer of programs we don't want to use. We put programs in there that we want to use. But in our brain, sometimes as we grew up from being young children, we might have some programming in there that isn't serving us anymore. So we've created a series of, in a book I wrote called Discover the Language of the Mind, I've outlined 13 core techniques that I teach therapists. And those are the techniques that are in the brain tapping system. Now, in order for it to work, we need to get them out of high beta and into theta. Theta is a state of hypermnesia or super memory. So for those listening out here, you probably woke up in the morning and heard a song on the radio, and maybe you didn't like that song, but it stuck with you all day. That's because you heard it in theta. So imagine
that's
putting
interesting.
a positive. So imagine that positive message, hearing that in the state of theta. It's going to be what we call top of the mind awareness, which means now when you think about if it's about food and you have to change your diet, now you're thinking about healthy foods, water-based foods, drinking more water, taking your supplementation, whatever it is that's positive, because you're not focused on the negative any longer. Now, in the same way that if you heard that song, the next morning you'll wake up, it'll probably be gone. You've got to listen to that over and over again to really learn it. So we take spaced repetition. That's where you can get on the BrainTap, use it 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and then it starts to form habits and patterns.
Well, now this is interesting too. I've heard that in order to memorize something, if your brain is in the beta state, you have to hear something like 70 times. I can't remember the statistics, and then it's fewer times in the alpha state. But if in the delta state, when you hear it or see it, you remember it just one time. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, we all possess a photographic memory. It's our recall system that's damaged. So
right.
When we were younger, actually, when you learned your language, all of us, when we learned a language, we actually absorbed the language. And they say that if we could learn a second language before the age of 7, we can learn almost any language from that time on, because the brain won't shut down those circuits. So what we can do, and those circuits are hardwired in at the state of theta. So that means that hypermnesia, that super memory state that I'm talking about. Now, the statistic that I like to kind of tell people about is that most people have heard the statement, it takes 21 days to create a change. You've probably heard that before, right? The reality is when Stanford and Harvard did that study, they said it takes 21 days to create a change, but what's the rest of the story? Kind of like Paul Harvey used to say. And the reality is the rest of the story is that's if you use visualization and relaxation techniques. They actually proved it takes 18 months to create a change if you do it on your own with your old thinking.
Interesting.
So we pull out of research what we want, and we kind of leave the rest. So what we're doing with the BrainTap is...
Well, let's talk about that. Talk about visualization, because I'm a golfer. And I was listening to your sports tapes. He's got tapes on everything from marital relationships to work to sports. Name all the different. I was trying to find it on my my phone here, but the category.
It'd take a long time to go through them all, but just know that we mostly focus on those things that are behavior changes, like weight loss, stop smoking, stress reduction, pain control. We even have them for neuropathy. We have programs for menopause. We also have sports programs in the golf program that you're listening to. We have different programs for like basketball. I'm actually working with the LSU gymnast team, which were the runner-up national champions last year. And 2 Olympics ago, I was working with the girls gymnast team, teaching them how to visualize.
Well, talk about visualization. I'm interested in that because I remember I listened to your tape on golf. Now, I don't know do you play golf at all?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we grew up on golf courses. So there were 6 of us boys, and my dad always got a job at the golf course.
Well, that's good. Well,
be out there playing.
Well, when I listened to your tapes, you talked about standing back behind your shot, visualizing that shot being made, thinking about it, standing there, visualize it 2 or 3 times, stepping up to the ball, taking some deep breaths, relieve yourself of tension, and just let the mind go to work on that. And I'm going to tell you what, when I did that, and I have forgotten to do that recently, because I need to go back and listen to that tape. I got a match Friday, and I need to listen to it. But it was amazing. I went like, this is just crazy. It was almost like I was cheating. And then, I don't know, I guess I forgot. I wasn't listening to the BrainTap on golf anymore. Then I forgot, got out of the habit. But it makes a huge difference. Talk about visualization, not just in golf or in sports, but in people's lives. How do you visualize, and how does the BrainTap system that you offer, folks, you've got to get one. As a matter of fact, I've got one I'm showing you right now on YouTube. If you're looking at live on YouTube, you can see the BrainTap. You can order this here at the Hotze Health and Wellness Center.
That's right.
It's not a high-ticket item for us. I don't know what we charge, a couple $100 for that, and then you can get hooked up to the BrainTap system where you have it on your iPhone or on one of your Androids, where you can just plug in and you can pick whatever you want to listen to. They usually last 10 to 15
20 minutes,
maybe at the
possibly.
most. And they are just so. I listened to one before I came on and did our earlier podcast today. I listened on Focus, and I was focused when I got there. I could feel it, and I don't know. You have a certain way about it with your neuro-linguistic programming that you help people learn to visualize. Explain how you do that, and explain to people how visualization of positive things can have an impact on the outcome and results in their life.
Okay. Well, number one, we all visualize. It's just some do it by default, and others have trained their brains to do it by intention. So what we're going to do with the BrainTap is we're going to teach them how to do it with intention. So instead of waiting for a catastrophe to happen, we're going to start visualizing the possibilities. And once you do that, Einstein used to call this thought experiments. So before he ever did an experiment, and so did Tesla, he would build everything in his mind first because his mind was so trained that it was as finely tuned as physical reality. So what we're going to do with proper language, we can get people to picture things. For instance, even the listeners right now can imagine one of their favorite times in their life, and they're probably going to have an image of that. And we can then ask the brain, make it bright and put the sound into it. And what happens is by giving the brain reference points to memories that we recall, because we typically remember things that were very good in our lives and unfortunately very bad in our lives. we don't remember the everyday things. But to maintenance the mind or teach the brain to use visualization, the same way we remember something, we can start to forecast or predict things. And that's what athletes do. And that's what we can do with our own life. So we have a saying, you get what you rehearse in life, not what you intend. So if I was to be on a television show and it wasn't live, even if it was live, I'd probably have practice first. I would rehearse it before I got out in front of the audience. Well, what BrainTap does is gives you time to rehearse the behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs you want to demonstrate in your physical world. It's better to make the mistake inside your brain than to make it out in the physical world. So using golf as an example, if anybody is a golfer, they watch professional golfers. And you'll notice that if they hit a bad shot, they don't leave that spot until they visualize that perfect shot 2 or 3 times. Because almost every professional golfer knows the brain doesn't know the difference between real or imagined. So if they imagine it going perfectly, now when they address the ball the next time, and if you watch a professional, they hit a bad shot, usually their next shot is perfect. They don't get those, what we call snowmen, those 8, so they rebuild, they respond. If I could hit that well out of the rough, I'd be aiming for it instead of the fairway, but they know how to get into a state, and that's what they call it in sports. You get into the zone,
right?
This physiological state. So what we teach with BrainTap is that you can change your psychology and it affects your physiology, and then of course you can change your physiology and it affects your psychology. So we want the two to work together. So this body-mind connection. In other words, think of it like being congruent. It's like some people say. The old country song that says, when she says, no, 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 but her body's saying yes, 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 that's incongruent. So we want to get the body and mind to be very congruent with what you want to do.
Well, I think
that's what the BrainTap helps to do.
That's very interesting. And I think that's a very important point. We want to have synchronicity and harmony between our thinking, our mental state, and our physical state. Doctor, I like to say this. I like to say good health is built on a tripod. And if we look back at biblical teachings, God made us mind, body, and spirit. So there are 3 aspects to good health. And if any one of those legs is out of balance, it affects the other 2 legs as well, and the tripod doesn't stand. So it's hard to be spiritually healthy if you're physically unhealthy. It's hard to be mentally healthy if you're spiritually unhealthy or physically unhealthy. They all affect one another. So what you do in your BrainTap, which I highly recommend anybody listening to this, get a BrainTap unit. You can contact us here at the OT Health and Wellness Center.
Absolutely.
We can set you up and ship one out to you. We're
Very
glad to
easy.
do that. And then you buy a subscription. I think you pay $10 a month or something like that, or $15, whatever it is, to BrainTap. You pay for that, and you have all the programs at your disposal, all 700 or more that you can scroll down at whatever you want to study or think about. Have your mind visualized. You can listen to that. And I'm telling you what, I've never seen any or heard anything. I don't know if anybody else does this or not, but look, when I see something that's excellent, I know it. I don't have to hear compare it to 20 other different items to see if it's really good. You know top drawer, first class when you see it. And the BrainTap system that Dr. Patrick Porter has designed is top drawer, first class, and it can make a dramatic improvement in your thinking and help you calm yourself down so you can think not only reactionary, which you're doing all the time, but you can think intuitively and creatively. And that's what's really important. When you get your mind in those states and you begin to think that way, you can be much more productive, and the things you have written down as goals and visualized to accomplish, you'll find that they start happening. And that's what's the beauty of this system. And it's amazing that how you stumbled and serendipitously got involved in that. And I know there's some Russians that were involved in this way back, some Russian scientists that studied that. I read about that in the past, and they had done some of the initial work, and you were able to pick that up and go where you're going. Now, let me just ask you a couple of more questions before we go on. I want to tell you how much I've enjoyed the program and being on with you. Now, you talk about visualization. When you're going to you're going to go on TV, you're going to go on stage. Now, there are all kinds of different personalities, and I'm quite a bit older than you. I'm 67. So I've been around the block and been on radio 15 years and TV number of years and been involved in political aspects for 40 years. So I've done public speaking all my life. You know, I was president of the student body in high school. So oftentimes when I go somewhere or I have the president of my company, sometime I'll ask her when we have our staff meeting, I'll say, what are you going to talk about today? And she tells me, I said, that's fine. You just play the tune, whatever tune you play, and then, you know, whatever riff you give me, then I'm going to play off that tune. And do you think some people have, what do you think causes that? I love to speak extemporaneously. I read a lot. I've got a lot of content. I've done a lot in my life. So I can always relate different topics very easily rather than have to do a prepared speech. You know, when I go on TV, I just wonder, I say sometimes, I wonder what's going to come out today. But I know it's going to be interesting. I know it's going to be interesting.
Right.
And what I can do is I feed off the crowd. I can draw that energy. I can suck that energy out of them, and I can play the crowd, and I know what works. And I don't know, it just comes out intuitively. Why do you think, I mean, what is that? What type of brainwave is that?
What is that brainwave?
What is that
Well,
brainwave?
that has to do with probably more to do with how you're balanced between the right and left hemisphere. And if some people have this whole brain, in order to actually make it through medical school, obviously you have to have a highly tuned left brain. But most people don't get outside of that box. You've actually moved beyond the box and started creating your own box. So that means that you're highly right brain. So that corpus callosum that we talk about, where the brain, the right and left brain communicate,
Right.
most people aren't able to do that. That's why they'll say to you, you mean you don't have a script? You didn't rehearse in front of the mirror? You didn't practice? And we call that intuitive knowledge. You know, and I have a saying that knowledge isn't power. Knowledge applied is power. So
I'm sorry, what is it?
That's very good.
Say that one more time.
Knowledge isn't power. Knowledge applied is power.
Right.
You know, because we all have access to the internet. So if we were playing, any kind of board game and we had access to the internet in 1970, we'd be the smartest guy in the room.
Right.
You know, but nowadays everybody has access to that. So what you have the ability to do, a lot of people can't think on their feet, right? They say when I stand up, my brain falls out of my feet. You know, they just don't know how to talk because of the stress. And that has to do with left brain and right brain functioning. In fact, stuttering happens because the left and right brain aren't communicating properly. And once they tune the brain, and that's why a lot of the brain tapping sessions have the light that goes back and forth between the right and left eye and the
Right.
sound that's going on. It's actually, we're training the brain to synchronize. And there are people like yourself. I never really, I know how to prepare because I've been doing this since the 80s, but it's not like I sit around and fret about what I'm going to say, because it's more intuitive knowledge. And then whoever I'm speaking to or with, I'm going to, not speak off the cuff. I have one doctor friend of mine, he says, I can't get up there like Patrick and just wing it. And he doesn't know I'm not winging it. You have the knowledge because you have the education.
Right. That's exactly.
It's just not everybody has access to that, and that happens I know we did a scan on you, but I bet if I looked at your scan, you would have that balanced brainwave we were talking about, where you'd have the 40% beta, the 30% theta, and probably 15%, 30% alpha and 15% theta, where you have a lot of going on in those other brainwaves, but you still have the dominant beta.
And his brain was really young. And Dr. Porter, his brain age was very young too. I don't remember
32.
exactly. A lot younger than mine. Yeah. I just remember that.
Yeah. So that has a lot to do with it. So, I love the saying Wayne Dyer used to say, never let an old person inhabit your body. So,
he's done well with that.
Thinking about, and it has a lot to do with beliefs. When you're doing something you love, your nervous system knows that, and your nervous system controls the health of your body as long as you're feeding it properly and you're getting, like you said, you're spiritually, physically, and emotionally balanced. Then you're going to have health by providing the right nutrients to the body. And if you're not getting those nutrients and you're not thinking the right thoughts, there's a lot of people that don't understand, if you're thinking negatively all the time, you're shutting down the healing potential of the body.
Exactly. That's so true.
When Buddha actually said 5,000 years ago, he who angers you conquers you. And so, and then when Jesus said, love your enemy, basically, love your enemy means when you love your enemy, you're sending loving energy through your body. When you're hating your enemy, you're sending hatred through your body. So we don't want to do that. Your brain has to create the corresponding chemical reaction to the thoughts you're thinking. So when you're upbeat, positive, you're doing something you love, and you wake up in the morning and you go, wow, there's something wrong with the society, and I'm talking about America, where there's more heart attacks on Monday morning than there are any other day of the week.
That tells you something right there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I've got to go to work. I guess I'm just going to have a heart attack and die.
Yeah.
Well, listen,
Yeah, so I mean,
Dr. Porter, Dr. Porter, I'll tell you another key point you just made. Because I do health and wellness medicine, we're primarily focused on the physical aspect of health, and that's balancing hormones, replenishing hormones naturally, vitamins and minerals, healthy eating program, and some exercise, treatment for allergies with immunization when it's indicated. So we're working on that aspect of the body, and we have some individuals. You get them on that, and they just blossom. I've given me their life back. I have some guests that they struggle, and I can't understand, or I do understand, but they tell me, well, I have one lady I'm thinking about now, it's under all this stress, and her husband's told her she's worthless, he wants to leave her, she's already been through a divorce, and it's Christmas, and she's got all this stress going on, and I'm trying to get her hormones balanced, but her mind is so negative. As a matter of fact, as we're doing the program, I thought about her. I'm going to call her right after the program and tell her that she needs to get the BrainTap and begin to use that, because we're feeding her nutrients in her body, the right nutrients, but she's not getting the right nutrients in her brain. She's got all these negative thoughts, and that adversely affects the ability of these hormones to properly function at a cellular level. Most people don't understand this. We have a philosophy at our center. The way we treat our guests, and we call our patients guests, the way we treat our guests is as important, if not more important, than the treatment we prescribe. Because if we can cultivate in them a sense of hope and optimism and a sense of well-being by being here, that somebody really cares, affirms them, understands them, and wants to help them, and it's not all in their mind. These are real problems they're experiencing. They're not hypochondriacs. They're experiencing some hormonal declines and imbalances or improper food habits or not enough vitamins and minerals. Once they understand and that somebody cares about them, it opens up the channels for their cells to accept our treatment, and they do well. If I were to walk in and give the same treatment, prescribe the same treatment, I'm talking about the vitamins, hormones, and eating program to a guest, but I treated her mean and told her she's stupid, she better take this. If she or he doesn't do that, they're dumb and they're horrible. They'd walk away with a negative attitude, and I could give them all day long, and they'd never get well. So there's a huge direct impact, as Dr. Porter has talked about and developed in his BrainTap system, that will enable you, if you'll use this system, and I highly recommend, it's inexpensive, my gosh, to have good brain health. You take this before you go to sleep at night, and you'll go into a deep sleep and wake up and feel refreshed. It's remarkable. You can do it in the morning when you get up. I have some people on our staff here. I know the president of our company, every morning she listens to BrainTap, and I think maybe Stacy does frequently.
The morning sessions are great, and I believe those are shorter, too. They're 10, 12 minutes, which is perfect for people who are on the go and maybe they can't fit in a 30-minute session. The 10 to 12-minute morning sessions are fantastic.
So I want to commend you for the outstanding work you've done and how you've helped literally hundreds of thousands of people regain a good, positive mental focus in their life that helps them physically be healthy and also helps them spiritually be healthy. So it opens up the gateway to the soul so that they can receive. Say, for instance, you listen to this before you go to church on Sunday, and then you might not fall asleep. You might listen to the pastor and get something out of the message. My pastor,
Yet another tip.
By the way, my pastor at Second Baptist uses this and loves it. So I want to.
We have the Christ-centered series too for those that want to deepen their
spiritual life. That's wonderful. I've seen that. Well, Dr. Porter, thank you for joining us today. It was a most interesting discussion. And again, congratulations to you on your success. I'm so proud to know you and be associated with your work and be able to recommend that to our guests here at the Hotze Health and Wellness Center. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Porter.
Well, thank you for having me, and I really appreciate what the work you're doing, because we hear a lot of good things coming out of Houston there.
Well, that's
Thank you.
great.
Yes, and if you want to do a 180 and take charge of your health, and one way to do that is the BrainTap system. You can certainly give us a call to order that at 281-698-8698. That's 281-698-8698. Thank you for joining us today here at Dr. Hotze's Wellness Revolution.
Information provided on this radio program is neither intended nor implied to be a substitute for professional medical advice and is not intended to replace the services of a physician, nor does it constitute a doctor-patient relationship. You should not use information from this radio program to diagnose or treat a health problem or disease without consulting with a qualified healthcare provider. If you have or suspect you have an urgent medical problem, promptly contact a professional healthcare provider or call 911. Dr. Hotze's Wellness Revolution radio program advises you to always seek the advice of a physician or other qualified health provider prior to starting any new treatment or with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Any application of the recommendations from this radio program is at the listener's discretion.